Senator Sheldon Whitehouse's grilling of Scott Bessent now hits harder than ever, exposing climate-driven economic risks and tax avoidance warnings that follow. Bessent straight into his new role as Treasury Secretary.
Treasury Secretary walked into power already carrying two storms: a climate-driven economic crisis he doesn't seem prepared for, and a Medicare tax controversy the IRS has already rejected. Senator Whitehouse saw both coming, and he said it on the record.
Thanks very much, Chairman. Welcome, Mr. Bassent. Thank you for the meeting we had in my office. I understand that colleagues have already raised the urgency of more sanctions on Russia's shadow fleet, particularly as it is sabotaging our allies' infrastructure in the Baltic, and urge that it is unfair for Chinese manufacturers to be able to underprice U.S. manufacturers by virtue of lower environmental standards. So I just want to give two big thumbs ups to both of those notions. As we talked about in my office, I think that the most immediate danger of a major economic collapse is going to come through the insurance industry. We're seeing signs of it in Florida already. The fires in LA are making it worse out in California, but it's occurring nationwide. And as we discussed, where you can't get insurance, you can't get mortgages, where you can't get mortgages, you can't sell properties at value, and that cascades, according to the chief economist of Freddie Mac, into a 2008-style massive economic recession. So I would like to ask first that you get somebody on your team to take a look at this report, which I'd ask to put into the record, from the Senate Budget Committee while I was chairing it, on the non-renewals, price increases, and unavailability problem county by county across the country. And if somebody on your team looks at it and can give you a summary, I would be grateful. And I would actually ask you personally to read this Economist magazine article. I don't think it's complicated.
No, Senator Whitehouse, you gave it to me in your office, and I did read it.
Good. So all right, so we're ahead of you. So I just want to make sure.
I will point out to my children behind me, doing your homework's important.
It is important, and thank you for doing that. I think you're the first person in the nominations here who's actually done the reading that has been proposed. So I just think that all of us need to be alert to this problem. I think it's actually started. Ernest Hemingway famously said that bankruptcies happen gradually and then suddenly. I think we're in gradually on a climate change-driven insurance crisis that will cascade out into the whole economy. I gave my Environment Public Works colleagues a book this thick. I gave your team a similar book of all the many high-level, serious, peer-reviewed studies that have shown these economic risks. And I just don't think we're ready for it. And I think it's really important that we be ready for it. And I don't want anybody to say that they weren't warned about it. So there's my warning. Last question to you, and I'm going to be treading into an area where I don't know a thing because I just heard about this morning, and I've been the ranking member in the EPW NOMS hearing. So what I did read this morning is that the manner in which you have structured your partnership has enabled you to avoid the payment of nearly $1 million in Medicare taxes, and that the IRS has taken the position that the manner in which you structured your partnership to avoid those Medicare taxes does not actually support avoiding Medicare taxes. And it's probably more complicated of an issue than you and I are going to get through in the next 1 minute and 13 seconds. So we'll follow up with a question for the record. But I just think that when we're dealing with these massive issues of income inequality and threats to Medicare and all of the concerns that I think actually helped propel President Trump to the presidency, it would be extremely awkward if the Secretary of the Treasury were taking advantage of a supposed avoidance mechanism that the IRS, which you oversee, has determined actually doesn't produce that result. And somehow those things need to come into alignment. I don't know why. I suppose the easiest thing would be to go back and pay the Medicare taxes. But again, this is way more complicated than you and I can dispose of in the next half minute. But I do think it's important. I think it's really important to send a message as an incoming Treasury Secretary that everything you do with respect to your personal taxes aligns with IRS guidance.
Senator White, thank you for the question. So it is the firm's taxes, and we are up to date on all our taxes. This matter is not by us, but it is in continuing litigation. If confirmed, I have agreed to shutter my firm, and I have also informed the ranking member and the chairman that I will provision the amount that is lower than the amount that was stated in the press release that went out last night, and I will hold that until till the case makes its way through the courts. So once
well, that seems like an attentive response to the problem, and I'm glad you respected this actually is a problem that needs to be attended to. So thank you.
Senator Sheldon Whitehouse's questioning of Scott Bessent has taken on a whole new meaning now that Bassent sits in one of the most powerful economic seats on the planet, U.S. Treasury Secretary, and this is the moment America looks back on and says, he was warned. In this explosive hearing, Whitehouse doesn't simply challenge a nominee. He lays out two converging crises that could reshape the U.S. economy for generations, and he puts Bassent squarely at the center of both. First, Whitehouse walks the committee through the climate-driven insurance and housing collapse now accelerating across multiple states, where insurers are fleeing high-risk regions. Homeowners are seeing premiums spike to unaffordable levels, and entire communities are becoming uninsurable zones. He warns that this is not a theoretical model, it is already happening. From Florida to California, from coastal regions to wildfire corridors, and the economic consequences could cascade through mortgage markets, property values, retirement savings, and middle-class wealth. Then comes the second bombshell. Whitehouse exposes shocking questions about Bassent's own tax avoidance structures, specifically Medicare tax avoidance schemes that mirror those repeatedly rejected by the IRS. He highlights how Bassent, a wealthy financier, may have used aggressive loopholes to reduce Medicare taxes, even as ordinary American workers pay those taxes automatically with every paycheck. Whitehouse presses him on why someone seeking to oversee the nation's finances would participate in the very tax strategies deemed abusive by federal authorities. But what makes this hearing so extraordinary now is hindsight. When these questions were first raised, Bassent was simply a nominee. Today, he is a Treasury Secretary, meaning every warning Whitehouse issued now echoes with far greater urgency. Whitehouse essentially asked, how can a man who benefited from questionable tax schemes be trusted to manage economic fairness for millions of Americans? How can someone who downplayed climate-driven financial risk be expected to steer the country through the biggest climate-linked housing and insurance crisis in modern history? As Whitehouse maps out the data, rising sea levels, billion-dollar climate disasters, insurers collapsing under record claims, the hearing becomes less about ideology and more about math. He explains that if insurers pull out, mortgages fail. If mortgages fail, housing markets crack. If housing cracks, the entire middle-class wealth engine collapses. And the Treasury Secretary is the person responsible for anticipating and mitigating exactly these risks. Whitehouse's tone grows sharper as he confronts Bassent with the reality that climate denial isn't just environmental negligence, it's economic malpractice. The senator essentially asks, what happens when the U.S. financial system finally collides with the physical world? Will the Treasury Secretary acknowledge the danger, or keep pretending the storm isn't coming? Then the hearing pivots again as Whitehouse zeroes in on Bassent's personal tax posture, detailing complex structures that allowed him to avoid Medicare taxes in ways the IRS has historically rejected. He warns that elevating someone who used such schemes sends a dangerous message to the public that the wealthy can legally contort the system to escape taxes while ordinary families pay their fair share. The contrast is brutal, unavoidable, and deeply political. The watchdog of the nation's finances may be someone who played games with the very taxes that fund America's most essential programs. Whitehouse lays out example after example, building the case that these structures represent not innovation but manipulation. And now, with Bassent officially installed, those questions are no longer academic. This clip matters because it foreshadows the economic battles to come. Will the Treasury Department confront climate-driven financial instability head-on? Will it pursue fair taxation or continue enabling loopholes that deepen inequality? Will it strengthen protections for homeowners and workers or stand by as climate shocks destabilize entire markets? Viewed today, Whitehouse's words feel less like political questioning and more like a warning shot aimed directly at the future. This hearing is a blueprint of the challenges America faces under Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, a moment where one senator laid out in stark terms what is coming and whether we were prepared for it. And now the country must ask, were the warnings heard or were they ignored? Because as Whitehouse makes clear, the consequences will not fall on politicians, they will fall on millions of families, homeowners, workers, retirees, and taxpayers whose lives will be shaped by the decisions made in the Treasury Department. If you care about climate economics, income inequality, tax fairness, and government accountability, this moment is not just a hearing, it's a preview of the next chapter of America's economic future.